The stars have been singing the same songs for 14 billion years, and Grandmother Scylla knew every note by heart. She sat alone in her observation station at the edge of a small solar system, watching a blue planet spin slowly through the darkness. 300 years she had been here. 300 years of silence, of patience, of waiting for something she could not name. The Vellani were the oldest living civilization in the known universe. They had watched the first stars burn into existence. They had seen galaxies collide and reform. They had witnessed 10,000 species rise from mud and reach for the heavens, and they had watched 9,900 of them fall back into dust. Scylla had stopped counting the species she had loved and lost. It was easier not to count. Her station was small and quiet. She had requested this posting after growing tired of galactic politics, tired of councils and debates, tired of watching her people become more careful with each passing age. The Vellani had learned, over billions of years, that caring too much only led to grief. Better to watch from a distance. Better to record and remember. Better not to get involved. So Scylla watched Earth. She had seen humans discover fire. She had watched them build pyramids and tear down walls. She had observed their wars and their kindnesses, their cruelties and their small, everyday mercies. She had seen a mother in ancient Egypt sing her baby to sleep, and she had seen a soldier in a modern war carry his wounded enemy to safety. Humans confused her. They were violent and gentle. They were stupid and brilliant. They killed each other over small differences, and then they died for each other over small kindnesses. On this particular day, Scylla detected something crossing the edge of the solar system. A small metal object, primitive by galactic standards, tumbling slowly through the void. She scanned it without much interest. Then she saw what it carried. The object held a golden disc. On this disc, humans had recorded their music, their greetings in dozens of languages, pictures of their families, their animals, their planet, mathematical formulas showing where they lived, instructions on how to play the recordings. Scylla had seen 10,000 species send messages into space. Almost all of them were warnings. Stay away. This is our territory. We are powerful and dangerous. Humans had sent an invitation. She played the music. A human voice sang something slow and sweet. Instruments she did not recognize created sounds that made her old heart ache in ways she had forgotten it could ache. Scylla had not cried in 4 billion years. She did not cry now, but something shifted inside her, something that had been asleep for longer than most stars had existed. She contacted the Vellani High Council for the first time in 2 centuries. The council members were surprised to hear from her. Most had forgotten she existed. The eldest, a being named Moro, who was 17 billion years old, asked what could possibly be important enough to break her long silence. Scylla told them about the golden disc. She played them the music. She showed them the images of human families holding each other, of children playing, of old people smiling. The council was not impressed. They had seen such things before. Young species were often sentimental before the long ages taught them wisdom. But Scylla said something that made them pause. She said, "They remind me of us. Not who we are now, who we used to be." The council chamber fell silent. No one had spoken of the old days in a very long time. The days before they learned to protect their hearts. The days when they still believed that love was worth the inevitable loss. Elder Moro shook his head slowly. He had loved too many young species. He had watched too many of them burn themselves out. He could not bear another heartbreak. But Scylla was insistent. She asked them to send a delegation to evaluate humanity properly. She asked them to look closer before deciding these creatures were just another species destined for dust. The council debated for 3 days. In the end, they agreed to send a small group to observe. Standard procedure. Nothing more. Scylla surprised them all. She announced that she would leave her station for the first time in 300 years. She would lead the delegation herself. Elder Moro asked her why. Scylla looked at the image of the golden disc still floating in the center of the chamber. A picture of a human woman holding her child. A simple image. Nothing special. But Scylla saw something in that mother's eyes. A fierce and tender love. A willingness to give everything for something small and fragile. a hope that had no guarantee of reward. She told Morrow, because I want to remember what it felt like to hope like that. And I think these humans can teach me. The Vellani had watched the universe for 14 billion years. They had learned patience and wisdom and caution. They had learned to protect themselves from grief. But watching from a distance had cost them something precious. Scylla did not know yet what humans would teach her. She only knew that for the first time in billions of years, she wanted to learn. She set course for the blue planet, and the stars, for once, seemed to sing a different song. Dorothy was 73 years old and had never expected to change the course of galactic history. She had expected to drink her evening tea, listen to some radio static, and go to bed early. The retired music teacher had kept her amateur radio equipment running for 40 years. It was a hobby her late husband had started, and she continued it to feel close to him. Most nights, she heard nothing but noise. Sometimes she caught distant conversations, weather reports, the lonely voices of other hobbyists reaching out into the dark. Tonight, she heard something different. The signal was clear and strange, repeating in patterns that seemed almost like language. Dorothy adjusted her equipment with hands that had taught thousands of children to play piano. She was not a scientist. She did not know she was receiving a transmission from beings older than Earth itself. She only knew that someone was trying to say hello. Meanwhile, the rest of the world was not handling things so calmly. The Vellani ship had been detected by every major space agency on Earth. Governments mobilized their militaries. Religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Scientists wept with joy and terror in equal measure. The United Nations called emergency sessions that accomplished nothing except panic. But the Vellani were patient. They had waited 14 billion years. They could wait a little longer. Scylla guided her ship into orbit around Earth and sent simple radio signals in mathematical patterns. She did not want to frighten these small, fragile beings. She wanted to understand them. And somehow, through accident or fate, her signal found its way to Dorothy's kitchen. Dorothy did not know what the patterns meant, but she understood, in the way that musicians understand each other across language barriers, that this was a greeting. So she greeted back. She did not send mathematical formulas. She did not send warnings or territorial claims. Dorothy did what she had done her entire life. She played music. She put her small radio near her old record player and dropped the needle on Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Then she sat down with her tea and listened along. In orbit, Scylla received the transmission. She did not recognize the instruments. She did not understand the structure at first. But as the symphony unfolded, as the voices joined in the final movement, something happened to her that had not happened in 4 billion years. She wept. The music contained everything the Vellani had forgotten. It was full of struggle and triumph, sorrow and joy, darkness giving way to light. It was created by beings who lived brief and painful lives, who faced death constantly, who had every reason to despair. And yet they had made this. They had turned their suffering into beauty. Scylla listened to the entire symphony without moving. When it ended, she contacted Dorothy directly. The conversation was simple. Dorothy did not panic when an ancient alien voice spoke through a radio. She was 73 years old and had survived losing her husband, raising 3 children, and teaching middle school music for 40 years. An alien visitor did not frighten her. Scylla asked, "Why did you send music?" Dorothy replied, "You said hello. I said hello back. Music is how I say hello." Scylla asked, "Do all humans make music?" Dorothy laughed. "Every single one, even the ones who think they cannot. We all have songs inside us." The formal first contact happened 3 days later. Scylla met with human representatives in Geneva, surrounded by diplomats and scientists and military officials. But she kept looking for Dorothy in the crowd. She had requested that the old music teacher be present. Scylla explained who the Vellani were. The oldest civilization, the watchers of the cosmos, the keepers of memory. They had seen the birth and death of gods. They had outlived galaxies. The human representatives were awed and terrified. They asked what the Vellani wanted from Earth. Scylla was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "We heard your music. We heard your invitation. We came because you reminded us of something we had forgotten. She looked at Dorothy, who was sitting in the back row, still wearing the same cardigan she had worn the night she first received the signal. Scylla continued, "We are very old. We have learned to protect ourselves from loss. We have learned not to care too much, because caring leads to grief. But your music made me remember what it felt like to care anyway. To love even though loss is certain. To hope even though hope is foolish." She paused. "I would like permission to stay on Earth for a time. I want to understand how you have kept this thing alive, this foolish and beautiful courage. I want to learn from you." The diplomats did not know how to respond. They had prepared for demands, for threats, for negotiations. They had not prepared for an ancient being asking to learn from them. Dorothy stood up from her chair. She walked to the front of the room, past all the important people in their expensive suits. She took Scylla's hand. She said, "Stay as long as you like. I will make you tea, and we will listen to music, and I will tell you about my husband and my children and my students. And you will tell me about the stars." Scylla looked at this small, fragile, wonderful creature, and she smiled for the first time in 9 billion years. The child was 5 years old and completely unafraid of the ancient alien sitting in her grandmother's garden. Scylla had been on Earth for 6 months now. She traveled quietly, observing, learning. Governments wanted to assign her security teams and diplomatic escorts. She refused them all. She wanted to see humans as they truly were, not as they performed for visitors. So she wandered. In Mumbai, she sat invisible in a hospital room and watched a woman named Priya hold her dying mother's hand through the night. The old woman was in pain, and there was nothing medicine could do. But Priya did not leave. She sang old songs from their village, songs her mother had sung to her when she was small. She sang until the sun came up and her mother finally let go. Scylla had watched countless beings die across 14 billion years. She had learned to feel nothing. But watching Priya sing to her mother made something crack inside her ancient heart. In California, she watched a firefighter named Ramon run into a burning house. Not for a person, for a stranger's dog. The ceiling was collapsing. His team was screaming at him to get out. But Ramon had heard the dog barking, and he could not leave it to burn. He came out with singed hair and a terrified golden retriever in his arms. The dog's owner, an elderly man who had already lost everything, wept and held Ramon like a brother. Scylla did not understand. She asked Ramon later, quietly, why he had risked his life for an animal. Ramon Shuja. He said the dog was scared. Someone had to help. As if it was simple. As if it was obvious. In Brazil, Scylla watched children in a poor neighborhood share their only meal with a stray cat. They had so little. They were hungry themselves. But they broke their bread and gave pieces to the thin, scraggly creature that had wandered into their lives. Scylla sent reports back to the Valani Council. She wrote, "They suffer constantly. Their lives are brief and filled with hardship. Their planet tries to kill them in 1,000 ways. Disease, disaster, violence. And yet they have not become hard. They have not become cold. They love fiercely, stupidly, without calculation." The council read her reports with concern. They worried that Scylla was losing her objectivity. Elder Moro warned her not to get attached. They had seen promising species before. They had all eventually failed, but Scylla kept sending reports. She met a woman named Ruth in a small town in England. Ruth worked in a hospice, a place where humans went to die. She sat with strangers in their final hours, held their hands, listened to their stories, made sure they were not alone when they left this world. Ruth was not paid well. The work was heavy and sad. Most people could not do it for long before their hearts broke. Ruth had been doing it for 20 years. Scylla asked her why. Ruth thought about it for a while. Then she said, "Everyone deserves someone at the end. Even if I am a stranger, even if I cannot save them, I can be there. I can make sure they know someone cared." Scylla asked, "Does it hurt you?" Ruth nodded. "Every single time. And I do it anyway." Scylla did not understand. The Valani had spent billions of years learning to avoid this kind of pain. They had built walls around their hearts. They had learned to watch from a distance, to record and remember without feeling. She asked Ruth, "What do your people believe happens after death?" Ruth laughed softly. "We do not know. We have 1,000 different ideas. But honestly, no one knows for certain. Scylla was confused. Then why sit with the dying? Why suffer for something uncertain? Ruth looked at her with gentle eyes. Because the not knowing is not the point. The sitting is the point. The being there is the point. Love does not need a guarantee to be worth it. Scylla sat with those words for a long time. She thought about the Villani, about how they had learned to protect themselves, about how they watched species rise and fall without getting involved, without risking their hearts. They had called it wisdom. They had called it survival. But Ruth called it something else. Ruth called it being alive. Scylla returned to her ship that night and drafted a message to the council. It was a request that had not been made in over 9 billion years. She asked to invoke the kin claiming. The kin claiming was an ancient ritual. It meant formally adopting another species as family. It meant sharing knowledge and protection. It meant promising to grieve when they were gone. No species had been claimed in 9 billion years. The Villani had stopped claiming kin because they could not bear to lose any more family. But Scylla looked at her reports. She thought about Priya singing to her dying mother, about Ramon running into fire for a stranger's dog, about children sharing their only food, about Ruth sitting with the dying because no one should be alone. She thought about what the Villani had lost by protecting themselves, and she decided it was time to remember how to love again. She sent the request, and the galaxy held its breath. Elder Moro had not felt fear in 8 billion years, but Scylla's request made his ancient heart tremble. The council chamber was full for the first time in centuries. Word had spread that someone had invoked the kin claiming, and every Villani who still cared about such things had come to witness the debate. Some were curious. Some were angry. Most were simply afraid. The last species the Villani had claimed as kin were the Lumina 9 billion years ago. They had been beautiful beings of living light, full of joy and wonder. The Villani had loved them like children. Then the Lumina had discovered a weapon that could shatter stars. They had used it on each other. In one terrible century, they had burned themselves out of existence. The Villani had mourned for 1,000,000 years. They had sworn never to claim kin again. The pain was too great. The loss was too certain. And now Scylla wanted them to do it again. For humans, Moro stood before the council and argued against it. His voice was heavy with old grief. He said, I have watched 10,000 species rise. I have loved hundreds of them. I have buried them all. The Threll, who made gardens that sang. The Cassari, who carved poems into mountains. The Lumina, who danced between stars. All gone. All dust. He looked at Scylla with tired eyes. Humans are violent. They fight wars over things they cannot even see, ideas and beliefs and borders. They destroy their own world while living on it. They will burn themselves out within 1,000 years, like all the others. And you want us to love them? You want us to claim them? You want us to grieve again? Scylla listened. She understood his fear. She had felt it herself for billions of years. But she had seen things on Earth that changed her. She said, I know humans are flawed. They know it too. They do not hide from their darkness. They showed me their wars, their genocides, their failures. They did not pretend to be better than they are. The council murmured. Most species try to hide their shame from the Villani. They presented their best face, hoping to impress the ancient ones. Scylla continued, but they showed me something else too. They show me what they do after they fail. She told them about Ruth, about the hospice where humans sit with the dying, about the memorials they build to remember their worst moments, so their children will not repeat them, about how they keep choosing to try again, even after everything falls apart. Moro shook his head. Pretty words, but they cannot change what they are. They are young and foolish and doomed. Scylla said, so were we once. The chamber fell silent. No one spoke of the old days. No one remembered when the Villani were young, when they loved without caution, when they reached for the stars with open hearts. Scylla said, we learned to protect ourselves. We learned to watch from a distance. We called it wisdom. But look at us now. We are safe, yes. We are careful. But when did we last feel joy? When did we last feel hope? When did we last love something enough to risk breaking? Moro had no answer. Scylla returned to Earth to gather final evidence for her case. She met with Ruth again, and she asked Ruth to help her understand something. She said, Elder Moro asked me to promise that humans will not destroy themselves. I cannot make that promise. How do I answer him? Ruth thought for a long time. Then she said, You cannot promise we will succeed. No one can. We might fail. We might burn ourselves out like all the others. Scylla waited. Ruth continued, But that is not the question, is it? The question is whether we are worth loving anyway. Whether the time we have together is worth the grief that comes after. She looked at Scylla with clear, steady eyes. My husband died 10 years ago. I knew, when I married him, that one of us would lose the other someday. But I married him anyway, because the love was worth the loss. Because I would rather have had him and lost him than never had him at all. Scylla carried those words back to the council. She stood before Moro and said, I cannot promise humans will survive. I cannot promise they will not fail. But I can tell you what Ruth told me. She repeated Ruth's words about love and loss. The chamber was silent. Moro closed his eyes. He was so tired. He had built walls around his heart so long ago that he had forgotten there was a heart inside. He had watched species die and felt nothing because feeling something was too painful. But Scylla's words reached him. Ruth's words reached him. He thought about the Lumina, about his friend among them, a being of golden light who had taught him to dance. He had not thought about that friend in 8 billion years. It hurt too much, but the memory was beautiful too. The dancing had been beautiful. Maybe it had been worth it. The vote was called. It would be close. Moro would cast the deciding vote. He opened his eyes, and he made his choice. The room where Moro kept his memories was hidden at the center of a dying star. No one else knew it existed. For 8 billion years, he had come here alone to remember the ones he had lost, the ones he had loved, the ones who had broken his ancient heart. Scylla found him there the night before the final vote. She had searched for him across 3 galaxies. When she finally arrived, she understood why he had chosen this place. The star was old and tired, its light fading. It reminded her of Moro himself. He did not seem surprised to see her. He simply gestured for her to enter. The room was small and filled with objects. Each one was a memory. Each one was a piece of someone who no longer existed. Moro picked up a small toy. It was simple, made of materials that had not existed anywhere in the universe for 7 billion years. He said, This belonged to a Threll child. Her name was something like singing water in their language. She gave it to me because I told her I was sad. She said toys helped when she was sad. Scylla looked around the room. There are thousands of objects. Poems carved in stone. Crystals that still hummed with ancient songs. Paintings made with colors that had no names. Each one was a ghost. Moro continued, I kept everything. Every gift. Every memory. I told myself I was preserving them. Honoring them. He set down the toy. But really, I was torturing myself. Reminding myself why I should never love again. Why we should never claim kin again. Scylla said nothing. She understood. Moro walked to a corner of the room where a single crystal floated in the air. It glowed with soft golden light, pulsing like a heartbeat. He said, This was my friend, A Lumina. We danced together among the stars. When the Lumina destroyed themselves, he was the last to go. He asked me to keep his light alive. The crystal pulsed steadily, still dancing, even after 9 billion years. Moro's voice cracked. I have not looked at this crystal in 8 billion years. It hurts too much, but I cannot let it go. I cannot let any of them go. Scylla finally spoke. You kept them because you love them. Moro nodded slowly. Scylla said, and the love was real. Even though they are gone, even though it hurts, the love was still real. Moro closed his eyes. Tears fell down his ancient face. He had not cried in 8 billion years, but the tears came now, hot and heavy and long overdue. He whispered, How do you do it? How do you open your heart again, knowing it will be broken again? Scylla thought about Ruth, about the hospice worker who sat with the dying, about her words on love and loss. She said, A human woman told me something. She said that love is not a calculation. It is a choice made knowing the cost. Moro opened his eyes. Scylla continued, We stopped choosing love because we were afraid of the cost. We thought we were being wise, but we were just being afraid. She walked to the crystal and watched its soft golden pulse. Your friend is still dancing. After 9 billion years, he is still dancing in this crystal. Because you love him enough to keep him alive. Because love does not end just because someone is gone. Moro stared at the crystal. At all his memories. At all his ghosts. He said the humans. They will die too. Maybe soon. Maybe they will destroy themselves like all the others. Scylla nodded. Maybe they will. Moro said. And it will break our hearts again. Scylla said, yes, it probably will. Moro was quiet for a long time. The crystal pulsed. The dying star hummed around them. 8 billion years of grief filled the room. Then Moro laughed. It was a strange sound, rusty from disuse. But it was real. He said, my friend would have loved humans. He loved everything that burned bright and fast. He used to say that the shortest flames were the most beautiful. He turned to Scylla. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of watching from a distance. I'm tired of protecting my heart instead of using it. He picked up the Thrall toy again and held it gently. These memories are not torture. They are proof that I loved. And love does not become worthless just because it ends. Love is the only thing that lasts. Scylla felt hope rise in her chest. Then you will vote for the claiming? Moro looked at his room, full of ghosts. Then he looked at Scylla. He said, I will do more than vote for it. I will speak for it. I will tell the council what I was too afraid to tell them for 8 billion years. He set down the toy. I will tell them that I miss loving. I miss the joy of it, even though it came with pain. I miss being alive, not just existing. He walked toward the door. Let us go claim some humans. Let us remember how to be a family again. They left the room together. Behind them, the golden crystal pulsed steadily. Still dancing, still loved, still alive. The valley in New Zealand was quiet when the first Valani ships descended through the clouds. They had chosen this place because it was the first spot on Earth to see each new sunrise. It seemed fitting for a new beginning. Humans gathered from every corner of the world. Presidents and farmers. Scientists and children. Dorothy, the retired music teacher who had first played Beethoven for the stars. Ruth, the hospice worker who had taught an ancient being about love. No one knew exactly what would happen. The Valani had not performed the kin claiming in 9 billion years. The ritual itself was older than most galaxies. But they had come. All of them. Because something about this moment felt important. Scylla stepped out of her ship first. She wore no special robes, carried no ceremonial objects. The Valani had learned long ago that truth needed no decoration. Behind her came Elder Moro, and behind him, hundreds more. The oldest living beings in the universe, standing in a small valley on a small planet, ready to do something they had sworn never to do again. Scylla walked to the center of the gathering. Humans and Valani stood together, waiting. She began to speak. 14 billion years ago, we were young. We were small and fragile and full of wonder. We looked at the stars and felt awe. We loved fiercely, without caution. We hoped without certainty. Her voice carried across the valley. Then we grew old. We watched the ones we loved die. We watched species rise and fall. We learned that love leads to grief, that hope leads to disappointment. So we stopped loving. We stopped hoping. We thought we were being wise. She paused. We were being cowards. The humans listened. Some wept without knowing why. Scylla continued. 9 billion years ago, we lost our last family. The Lumina, beings of living light. We loved them so much that when they destroyed themselves, we swore never to claim kin again. We built walls around our hearts. We told ourselves we were surviving. She looked at Moro. The ancient being nodded. But survival is not living. Watching is not feeling. We have existed for 14 billion years, but we stopped being alive a long time ago. She turned to face the humans directly. And then we met you. The wind moved through the valley. The sun was rising, painting the sky in colors that had no names. You are small and fragile and brief. Your lives last barely 100 years. Your planet tries to kill you constantly. You fight and struggle and fail over and over again. Scylla's voice grew warm. And yet you have not become cold. You have not stopped loving. You sit with the dying because no one should be alone. You run into fire for strangers. You share your last meal with stray cats. You create beauty out of suffering. She placed her hand over her heart. This was the gesture of the kin claiming. You reminded us of who we used to be. You reminded us that love is worth the risk, that hope is worth the disappointment, that being alive means opening your heart, even though it will be broken. Moro stepped forward. His ancient voice carried across the gathering. I have loved and lost more than any being alive. I have buried friends from 10,000 species, and I swore I would never love again. He looked at the humans with eyes that had seen the first stars ignite. But you taught me that love does not become worthless because it ends. The ones I lost are still with me. They're still dancing in my memories, and they would want me to dance again. He placed his hand over his heart. One by one, every Villani present did the same. Scylla spoke the final words of the ritual. You are not our children. You are not our students. You are our kin. You carry the same light we carried when we were young. The light of loving without guarantee. The light of hoping without certainty. The light of choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. She smiled. One day, you'll be old like us. You will travel the stars and watch young species rise. And you will find someone who reminds you of what you once were. Someone small and fragile and full of wonder. And you will claim them as your own. Because that is what family does. The ritual was complete, but the humans did not kneel. They did not bow. Dorothy, 93 years old now and leaning on a cane, walked to the front of the gathering. She carried a small violin she had not played in 20 years. She began to play. Other humans joined her. Instruments appeared. Voices rose. People who had never met began singing together, creating something unrehearsed and imperfect and utterly beautiful. The Villani listened, and they remembered. They remembered what it felt like to be young, to love without caution, to hope without certainty, to create beauty simply because beauty was worth creating. Scylla found Ruth in the crowd. They stood together, watching the celebration. Ruth asked, "What happens now?" Scylla thought about it. She thought about the future, which was uncertain, about humans who might fail or might flourish, about the Villani, who had finally remembered how to feel. She smiled. "I do not know," she said. And for the first time in 14 billion years, that uncertainty feels like a gift. The sun rose over the valley. The music played, and the oldest civilization in the universe learned to be young again.